How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, S-H-O-W, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
To the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, conversationalists. It's Eric Erickson here across the nation. Happy to have you with me. If you will, please text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777 and get the show notes, subscribe, follow me on social media. One housekeeping note, I am not going to be here tomorrow. Those of you who've asked, my dad gets out of the hospital today. I will be there tomorrow to check on my mom and my dad and spend time with them tomorrow. I will be back on Monday. Then I'm going to be gone again next Friday. And then the next Friday, I'm going to be gone, but I'm going to be on air. How am I old? I've got to take my son on a college tour on the 14th. And they're going to the college is going to let me do my show from the college campus. So it should be an interesting, fun day over at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. Beautiful campus over there. My gosh, it's a beautiful campus. Okay, we got to talk about witches. But I want to start a different way. You guys probably have heard me reference Tim Keller. Many of you don't know Tim Keller. Let me put it to you this way. If you've never heard of the guy, but you're someone who's curious at all about religion, he's one of the most prolific religious authors of the early 21st century. And he wrote a book that in my kids' school is required reading called The Reason for God. If you want a great book on belief, religious belief in an age of atheism and skepticism, the book you want he wrote it. The Reason for God is the name of the book. The Reason for God. The Reason for God was actually a New York Times bestseller. And essentially, it makes the case that, so let me back up. A very long time ago, there was a Christian apologist and philosopher who wrote a book, and it was called Warranted Christian Belief. Now, what you have to understand about warranted Christian belief is that Alvin Plantinga wrote a book on philosophy and ethics and on belief, and it was published by Oxford University Press, and it was a brilliant book, well-received, well over my head. And he then wrote a volume called Warranted Christian Belief that Oxford University Press published, and essentially they couldn't, once he had established this framework for reason and logic, Oxford University Press, which published that book, which was a world-renowned book, could not then deny him this second book that used the framework that Oxford University Press found profound to then deny him publishing a book that uses that framework to make the case for God. But it's a very academic book. I had to read it in seminary. Along comes Tim Keller, who writes a book called The Reason for God, and he wrote it, when was it written? I've got it pulled up right here on Amazon. It was written in 2008, and it is an easy book to read, and it is one of the best books written in the 21st century arguing for the existence of God. And if you're an atheist in particular, I would challenge you to read it. In fact, a number of very prominent atheists read the book and second-guessed their own atheistic views. I challenge you, if you're an atheist, to read The Reason for God. Challenge you to read it. But if you need a book on Faith in a Secular Age, The Reason for God by Tim Keller, probably the best book written in the 21st century on the issue. It is fashionable to hate Tim Keller these days on the right because Tim Keller posited this view as a very C.S. Lewis-based view on a third way in politics. And essentially, C.S. Lewis had a very famous line that if you really wanted a Christian society, it would be far more socialist than the conservatives want, and it would be far more socially conservative than the progressives want. Tim Keller kind of embraced it. He's a big fan of C.S. Lewis, quoted him often in his sermons. And essentially, Keller's point was that you got to be prophetic to your own side, and you can't just embrace your tribal side because your tribal loyalties to a party are to advance politics. They're not to advance the kingdom of God. I actually became a friend of Tim Keller's because I criticized him very publicly and very loudly about a tweet he had made about abortion politics. And he picked up the phone and called me out of the blue. Got a text. Eric, this is Tim Keller. I'd like to talk to you. I texted him back and said, call anytime, and he called then and there. And we struck up a friendship. And by the way, I changed his mind on that particular tweet in his view. He wound up deleting the tweet about abortion politics and how Christians should engage in it. He deleted it. We didn't always agree. We oftentimes found ourselves more aligned than we thought, and he was a very good man. Let me give you a sense of Tim Keller. He died in 2023. He suffered from pancreatic cancer. He actually came on my show, sat down with me, and did a pretty lengthy interview for Easter the year before, which I tend to play every Easter now. A few weeks before Tim Keller died, he was in pain. He was not doing well. He was fading. And Tim Keller called me to see how my wife was doing with her battle of cancer and gave me a list of people he hoped I would commit to pray for. Wanted to know how my prayer life was. His very first question was asking me how my prayer life was. Before he even asked about my wife, the man was on the verge of death. Weeks later, he would die. And he summoned the energy to call just to see how my prayer life was and how my wife was doing, and would I pray for some people for him. That's the Tim Keller I knew. And it's very fashionable for some young evangelicals these days to hate Tim Keller because they're very involved in politics. And Keller essentially said that you got to be prophetic within your own tribe, and that means you can't just be a loyal foot soldier for a tribe. And one of the things that he said that really struck me, probably made the most lasting impression on me, was this. When Christians get into political power, they very often wind up advancing their political agenda more than their faith. Historically, when Christians get into politics, they start making compromises that turn toward putting their politics ahead of their faith. A political tribe is a much more alluring narcotic than a faithful witness in politics. And it's true, and you see it all the time. You see the number of Christians who they thought Bill Clinton should be impeached because of his character, and by now they're okay with Donald Trump's character. You see a bunch of Christians who think no woman should be in the pulpit, but they're perfectly fine with a prosperity gospel heretic named Paula White being in charge of the president's faith outreach. For all the young men and Theo bros who hate Tim Keller because he wanted them to operate differently in politics so they weren't consumed by politics but actually advancing the gospel, let's talk about witches and witchcraft. I told you guys a couple weeks ago I was in Vermont, and there were 4 bookcases dedicated to self-transformation, and let me read you the titles that are on the bookcases. The Practical Witches Spellbook, Wicca, Essential Oils Magic, Spellcrafting, Sacred Plant Magic, Talking to the Trees, Wild Wisdom, The Good Witch's Guide, The Crystal Witch, The Witch's Way, How to Use Crystals, The Modern Witchcraft Book of Tarot Reading, The Modern Witchcraft Book of Astrology, The Modern Witchcraft Book of Self-Care, The Book of Witchcraft, Pandemonium, spelled demon, The Guide to Summoning the Correct Demon, The Encyclopedia of Spirits, The Witch's Spell a Day, Solitary Witch, Sacred Herbs for Yule and Christmastide, Everyday Magic, Reversal Magic, Witch in Darkness, Wicca, The Complete Guide, The Complete Book of Incense Oils and Brews, The Witch's Almanac, The Magic Journal, Moon Magic, Your Complete Guide to Harnessing the Mystical Energy of the Moon. They had four book cases, not shelves, not rows, 4 cases of these. Now, in fairness, the 4th was tarot cards, crystals, and Ouija boards. But 3 of them. Oh, and let's not forget the healing nature of water and water magic. The President of the United States has advanced Casey Means to be Surgeon General of the United States. The hearing was supposed to be today, but God bless her. She has given birth to her child. Prayers for her family, and I hope she sees the light. Casey Means is a new mom today, so the hearing's going to be rescheduled. But Casey Means practices witchcraft. She has written about it. She has written about her experience. She wrote about how she channeled moon magic, how she spoke to trees for guidance. She engaged in quote-unquote indigenous wisdom. It's interesting how all the people on the right who blast wokeism, they're totally fine with her channeling indigenous wisdom. She has used spiritual mediums and psychedelic drugs to connect to the spiritual realm and talk to spirits and ancestors. She's engaged in witchcraft, and she's not only engaged in witchcraft, she has bragged about her engagement in witchcraft. She has tried to normalize the practice of witchcraft. Casey Means is an occult practitioner. It's not an exaggeration. She has engaged in occult practices that Christians are told in their faith that they not only should shun, but they should run from them and they should not support them. And isn't it remarkable how all of these people who talk about Christian nationalism and getting Christians involved in politics, they're really quiet about a witch being nominated to be Surgeon General. They're dismissive of it. She doesn't like red dye and M&Ms, so therefore she should be Surgeon General. And this gets back to Tim Keller's point, how when you begin to make compromises in politics, the compromisers are always against your faith, not your politics, or very often are. Rare is it the person who compromises their politics for their faith. And you start the drip, 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 drip. And pretty soon, the Christians who said, character no longer really matters. Donald Trump's not running for president. Who cares how many affairs he's had and divorces he's had? Character doesn't matter. We can have a heretic in the faith office. Now suddenly, witch, not bad. I mean, she's not trying to convert me to witchcraft, so we can put a witch in power. We can put a woman who has written about engaging in occult practices into the Surgeon General's office. And what is remarkable is the number of people who will attack a guy like Tim Keller for his views, an Orthodox Christian pastor who led a lot of people to the Lord, by the way, and ministered in New York City as an evangelical Bible-believing Christian who actually believed the Bible was the inerrant word of God. They'll attack him and be real quiet about a witch in the role of Surgeon General. Well, she doesn't have a broomstick. I saw some commenter on a piece I wrote that she pretends to be a witch. No. There's not pretending to be a witch. You can say witchcraft is baloney, but she believes in the power of the moon. She believes in the healing power of the crystal. She believes in talking to the trees to channel energy. She believes it. Even if you think it's not true, she does. Paganism is on the rise in the country. You got 4 book cases at a Barnes & Noble in Burlington, Vermont, dedicated to summoning demons and casting spells. You know, when I pointed this out at my speech in Vermont that night to the Vermont Republican Party, several people come up to me afterwards and they said, you know how the rest of the country is upset about those pornographic books in elementary schools that the left is putting? Said up here, they're actually bringing these witchcraft books in and they're reading the witchcraft books to kids. That's what we're concerned about. I'm just very interested in how the young men and women of the Christian right who can attack and malign Tim Keller because of his views on politics are really, really quiet about someone who has practiced witchcraft being appointed to the office of Surgeon General. Casey Means has written about practicing witchcraft. It's not speculation on my part. She herself has admitted to it. She's also not a practicing doctor. She's let her medical license lapse, and she didn't even finish her residency. But she hates red dye in your M&Ms, so we'll give her a pass, I guess. We have a bunch of hippie faith healers within the evangelical church these days who have rejected modern science for essential oils and crystals. They're practicing witchcraft, too. They just can't admit it, and that's why they're fine with a Wiccan in the White House. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to Larry Richardson. He is the most, probably one of the most astonishing and well-cited, heavily cited mathematicians in the world right now. Larry Richardson is an early career mathematician with lots of potential. According to Google Scholar, he's authored a dozen papers on topics ranging from complex algebra to the structures of mathematical objects, ranking up more than 130 citations in 4 years. It is a rather remarkable feat, made more so because Larry Richardson is a house cat. It was an exercise in absurdity, says Reese Richardson, a graduate student in metascience and computational biology at Northwestern University. Earlier this month, he and fellow research misconduct sleuth Nick Wise at the University of Cambridge cooked up Larry's profile and engineered the feline scientific ascent. Their goal, to make him the world's most highly cited cat by mimicking a tactic apparently employed by a citation-boosting service advertised on Facebook. In 2 weeks, they accomplished their mission. The stunt will hopefully draw awareness to a growing issue of the manipulation of research metrics, says Peter Lang, a higher education consultant and emeritus professor of political science at Duke. I think most faculty members at the institutions I know are not even aware that there are citation mills. As a general rule, the more a scientific paper is cited by other studies, the more important it and its authors are in a field. One shorthand is the popular H-index. An H-index of 10 means a person has 10 papers with at least 10 citations each, for instance. Inflating a researcher's citation count in H-index gives them a tremendous advantage in hiring and tenure decisions, says Jennifer Byrne, a cancer researcher at the University of Sydney. It also drives a business model of shady organizations that promise to boost your citations in exchange for cash. If you can just buy the citations, you're buying influence. And Larry the cat, in 2 weeks, became the most cited cat in science and one of the most cited supposed people in mathematics in the world. Hillsdale College is going to cite real mathematicians and put you in front of real mathematicians with their great class on mathematics, but also they've got 39 other ones to choose from, 40 total classes on political science, history, math, you name it. Right now, they've actually got a great 6-part documentary series on the founding of our republic and the colonial period. The time in history, Greek and Roman history and the early American republic are just, that's where my history fascination is. That's where my core was in college in my history major. And there's so much related between them. You can see all of this with their free documentary series. You go to ericforhillsdale.com today and you sign up. ERICK, ericforhillsdale.com. Sign up. It's 6 episodes. They're really well researched. They're highly documented. There are no house cats being cited, but actual historians who actually know what they're talking about the rise of the early American Republic and how there is a history that predates the country by a couple hundred years. ericforhillsdale.com. Go watch it today. It's really good. Hello, America. It is Eric Erickson here. Glad to have you with me. I got to talk about the Russians for just a moment because, well, there's an interesting report out about them. And essentially wanting a new Cuban Missile Crisis. So a Russian official threatened to supply nuclear missiles to Venezuelan Cubans, called the United States a Russian enemy. That would be the Defense Committee Deputy Chairperson of the Russian Duma, Alexei Zhuravlov. He said on October 29, Russia can deliver nuclear-capable missiles to Venezuela or Cuba, which he noted are located near Russia's main geopolitical adversary. He didn't say the United States, but he, of course, meant it. The man said the Russians had an entire range of missiles at its disposal and will use what is needed, and said the United States is not a friend or a partner of Russia, but is an enemy. At the same time, Putin continues to tout new Russian nuclear missiles to threaten the United States. He announced October 29th Russia tested a Poseidon nuclear-powered unmanned underwater vehicle on October 28th and touted the vehicle's alleged speed and power. Putin also recalled Russia's recent test of the Berezvetsnik missile, which is similarly nuclear-powered and has similar characteristics. His announcement of even more newly tested nuclear-powered weapons defy President Trump's call for Putin to focus on ending the war in Ukraine, not testing missiles. Putin is detailing the alleged attributes of the weapons to add weight and urgency to his nuclear test to enact concessions from the United States on Ukraine. He's raising the specter of nuclear war to get Trump and European officials to concede to Russia's demands. Okay. I need to break this one down for you because I'm not an expert, but I know the experts. And I know the people who really know the Russians, not just pretend to. There's a fundamental problem with Vladimir Putin's logic. Vladimir Putin has turned Russia into a dependency of the Chinese. He doesn't think of it that way, but they are. And the Chinese do not want a nuclear war with the United States. They want a lot of things. They don't want a nuclear war. The Chinese have actually built up a massive military capacity to beat us without ever firing a nuclear missile. Think about this. The Chinese are right now in our water grid, our power grid, our telecom grid, and they can shut us down with the push of a button in China. They can turn off the lights, turn off the phones, and turn off the water in the United States with the push of a button, and we haven't been able to figure out how to get them out of the power grid, the water grid, or the telecom grid. They don't want a nuclear war. Russia threatening a nuclear war doesn't serve China's purposes. It drags China into something they don't want to be a part of. So a lot of it is bluster. Now they're threatening to send nuclear weapons to China, to Cuba and Venezuela. I don't know if you guys know this. Do y'all pay attention to Cuba at all? Cuba is on the verge of collapse. The Castro brothers left it in terrible condition. Fidel died. His brother took over. He stepped down. I don't know if he's dead yet or not, but you've got new non-Castro leadership in Cuba, and things are not going well for the Cuban public. The economy, the lights don't stay on daily. The water system is collapsed. They're just now being hit with a massive hurricane. Things are not going well for the Cubans. So sending nuclear missiles to Cuba doesn't do a whole lot of good. And you know what the Cubans are doing? The Cubans are actually building intelligence capacity for the Chinese. They're not even building capacity for the Russians anymore. They're spending more time helping the communist Chinese. It's actually really fascinating to see the divergence there. The Venezuelans, on the other hand, are increasingly a narco-terror state, and I do believe one of the reasons that Donald Trump is as invested as he is in the present destabilization campaign in Venezuela is because he understands the threat that they are to the United States. He actually understands, the president does, that they could be inviting, importing into the United States even greater danger and ties that we want to avoid. The Venezuelans can move narco-terrorists into the United States. They have studied the capacity to get people across our borders. But the narco state of Venezuela is also tied up with wanting a war in Guyana. They're trying to build relationships with the Colombian leader, but the Colombian people don't like the Venezuelans. It's a serious problem for the Venezuelans. So for the Russians to be making these threats, it actually sounds more and more like this is to stoke nationalist sentiment in Russia than for the Russians to actually be able to carry anything out. And I don't know that they would with Donald Trump in charge. The greatest strength that Donald Trump has on the international stage is that he is so unpredictable. They never know what's going to set him off. Think about the Canadians. So we have states. The Canadians have provinces. And Ontario is one of the eastern Canadian provinces. And the leader of Ontario decided to launch an ad campaign about tariffs. And what did Donald Trump do? Donald Trump did not target Ontario and Ontario businesses. Donald Trump targeted all of Canada with more punitive tariffs because of what basically it would be like Gavin Newsom in California running an ad campaign in Canada as if he represented all Americans, that Rob Ford in Canada, the Ontario Prime Minister or Premier, he ran an ad campaign in the United States against tariffs using the words of Ronald Reagan as if he was Canada's leader. Donald Trump beat down all of Canada because of the governor of one of their states, essentially. It's kind of remarkable. And yet, it's a destabilizing thing on the world stage for other leaders because they don't know what Donald Trump is going to do. President Donald Trump, this is from the BBC. Donald Trump has called on U.S. military leaders to resume testing nuclear weapons in order to keep pace with other countries such as Russia and China because other countries testing programs. I've instructed the Department of War to start testing our nuclear weapons on an equal basis, he wrote on social media just before meeting with Xi Jinping in China or in South Korea. The U.S. has more nuclear weapons than any other country, Trump said, with Russia in second and China a distant third. It has not conducted nuclear tests since 1992. It comes days after Trump denounced Russia for testing a nuclear-powered missile. The Kremlin says its tests were non-nuclear, and now they're bragging about their nuclear submarine drone tests. He also says that the Chinese program will be more advanced and even with us in about 5 years if we don't do something. You know, one of the reasons for the Chinese purge of generals a while back, not the current one's over rumors of a coup. The last one was because when they went to actually test their nuclear missiles, it turns out that someone had taken in one cluster of nuclear missiles, had taken out the fuel and replaced it with water. No, I'm not making that up. You can look it up for yourself. It was an act of corruption, and Xi Jinping fired the military leader in charge of the nuclear program in China because someone had actually drained a nuclear missile of its fuel and filled it back up with water. Nobody knows what happened to the fuel. Probably went to take care of some families. Now President Trump wants to run it up. And by the way, he did it right before meeting with Xi Jinping. He made the announcement. It completely off guard. No one was expecting it. And along comes Trump saying, let's do more nuclear tests. And along comes the Russians saying, hey, we may put nukes in Cuba and Venezuela. I dare them to try. I legitimately dare them to try. We're going to have another Cuban Missile Crisis, and I don't think it's one that Vladimir Putin can stand to win. And I think it is one that Donald Trump would relish having. I think it is actually a fight that the Trump administration would like to have. It would make him seem tough. It would be Kennedy-esque. It's just kind of remarkable. So, where does all of this leave us? Well, it leaves us with Trump commanding the stage and everyone else reacting to him. You notice no one ever did this with Joe Biden. And this kind of leaves me here towards the end of the show today where I started with. Joe Biden couldn't walk up a flight of stairs without spending a week in Delaware on the beach recovering. Donald Trump has been to the Middle East. He's now been to Asia. He's coming home. He's had multiple whirlwind tours over less than a month's period, and he's coming home in his prime at the age of 80, commanding the entire global stage. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are left in his dust. You know I'm one who is very willing to criticize Donald Trump. And I also know that there are a lot of people who can never give Donald Trump credit for his successes. But I think you've got to give credit to Trump for his stamina at 80 years old on the world stage, keeping everyone guessing. You know, we do a lot of research on the show, and one of the things that keeps people coming back to the program is that it's unpredictable. You don't know what I'm going to talk about, what I'm going to say, the position I might stake out on an issue, and it keeps people coming back. I mean, I try to do the news, so if it's a big headline, you know it's going to get covered out of the gate. If there's breaking news, it's going to be covered. But on for example, slow news days, what am I going to cover? You gotta tune in. It's very predictable with a lot of other shows. It's one of the things I admire about Trump, unpredictability. You never know what he's going to do, what he's going to say. It always keeps you in a whirlwind. It always keeps him at the center of attention, and it always lessens the leadership of others. Xi of China, caught off guard by Trump's announcement of nuclear tests. Vladimir Putin caught off guard by Trump's announcement of nuclear tests. The Russians came out and said, no, we're not testing nuclear weapons. Trump says, we're going to test nuclear weapons. We know the Russians were doing it. Our intelligence says they were doing it, and they've admitted it privately. We're going to test nuclear weapons. They're like, no, we didn't. Okay, yeah, we did. And then there's the Maduro issue, and now you got Marco Rubio as well, trying to topple a regime. This is from USA Today. In late January, President Nicolas Maduro and President Donald Trump's special envoy Richard Grenell smiled as they shook hands in the Venezuelan leader's gold-embossed Caracas palace. The deal they just sealed meant 6 Americans detained in the country would be freed in exchange for hundreds of Venezuelan migrants whom the Trump administration said belonged to the Venezuelan gang Trinidad. It marked the first time in years that a U.S. official met face-to-face with Maduro, a protege of Hugo Chavez. Maduro is in his 12th year as president after what international observers say was a rigged 2024 vote. Some hope Grenell's deal would lower tensions between Washington and Caracas, but the U.S. has dramatically shifted gears since that glowing moment at the palace. Instead, Marco Rubio appears to have taken Grenell's place and is spearheading an aggressive campaign to bring down Maduro. 9 months after Grenell and Maduro's pact, 8 U.S. warships are circling the waters off Venezuela, and the largest U.S. aircraft carrier and its 3 escorts are cruising towards the region. Roughly 10,000 troops are stationed in the area. B-1 and B-52 bombers have approached Venezuelan airspace 3 times in 2 weeks in an undisputed threat of force. At least 61 people, many of them Venezuelans, have been killed in U.S. strikes on boats in international waters, which the Trump administration says were carrying drugs. USA Today adds, without providing evidence. The strikes, which the Trump administration has said are part of an armed conflict with cartels, were ordered without congressional approval. Trump has turned aside Maduro's offer of access to Venezuela's oil reserves in exchange for maintaining power. Instead, his administration has gone all in on a campaign led by Marco Rubio to force Maduro from office. They keep it interesting. They keep it shaken up. They keep other nations guessing. Again, the President of the United States has been on a world tour for basically the last month, and he's come home still full of energy, still making decisions that no one guesses are coming. They come. There's very little downtime. The last President of the United States was incapable of doing that, and I wonder how many world leaders thought, Trump's coming back at 80. He's going to be a tired old man like Biden, and he's kept them surprised at this as well. There are plenty of things that I could say that are critical of Trump, but I got to tell you, I'm really impressed, 1, with his stamina, and 2, with his ability to shake up the world stage by just being so completely unpredictable, but his unpredictable nature is all for the benefit of the United States, unlike, oftentimes, Joe Biden. Hello there. My friend Taylor, who sometimes emails me just fascinating links that I should use for show prep, just literally sent me this. Maryland State Senator Dahlia Attar has been indicted after allegedly filming 2 of her rivals in bed together in an attempt to silence them. The bombshell indictment filed on October 23rd alleges that Attar, 35, planted tracking and recording devices to catch her 2 critics in the act, and then threatened to release the footage of the 2 in bed unless they met her demands not to speak out against her publicly. She's facing 8 federal charges of extortion and conspiracy related to the alleged plot, which prosecutors say occurred in the run-up to the 2020 and 2022 elections. The target of her scheme was allegedly a political consultant whom Attar filmed in bed with a married man. The Democratic state senators held office since 2019, was the first Orthodox Jewish woman to serve in the Maryland State Senate. She was selected to fill a vacant seat in January. She's been recognized as the highest-ranking Orthodox Jewish woman in U.S. history, is currently in a hotly contested re-election campaign to retain her seat, and she's going to go to jail. Court records posted by the Baltimore Sun showed Adar is in federal custody along with her brother Joseph and another man named Kalman Finkelstein. According to the indictment, she, her brother, and Finkelstein worked with 4 unnamed co-conspirators to carry out the clandestine scheme. Having worked with the political consultant, who's a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen, they parted ways over disagreement. She's trying to blackmail him. That is, wow. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, except this woman going to go to jail. Yeah, that's actually kind of fascinating to me that she would go that far to do something like this to preserve power. That politicians, man, you know, I didn't like being a politician. The worst job I ever had was elected office. There's this thing called a constituent, and they're stupid, and they're whiny, and they need stuff from you all the time, and they yell at you at the grocery store if they don't get their way. I was like, nope, I don't want this. And then you got some people out there who they just can't help. They gotta be elected office. People call me all the time and say, you should run for the city. You should do this. Like, nope, my wife would bury me in the backyard under Quikrete, and I wouldn't want to do it anyway. There is no way. And some of these people are so desperate for it, they're willing to commit crimes to hold on to power. Shame, shame, shame. Between bank collapses, interest rate cuts, and turmoil in the markets, gold prices going up, Swiss America has been the trusted leader in precious metals for 40 years, and they've been warning people about a secret war on cash. The government's trying to steer you to plastic and control your actual cash purchases, and now your crypto purchases as well. You need the free report from Swiss America on the secret war on cash. It takes less than 15 minutes to read. You can get a free copy by calling or texting 800-289-2646. All you have to do is mention Eric. When you call or just text them, if you're like me, you don't want to talk to people, you text them to the phone number 800-289-2646. Text them my name, Eric, E-R-I-C-K. They'll send you a link. You follow the link, you get the report completely free. It's completely free. You can also go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric, SwissAmerica.com/ERICK. Fill out the information. Get the Secret War on Cash report completely free, or call or text my name to 800-289-2646. 800-289-2646. Get the report for free from Swiss America. Message and data rates may apply.